Hello, this is Erica Norton, and I'm the founder of Perfect Legal Video. I'm very excited to have with us today Attorney Nicole Reeves Lavallee. She owns a family and real estate law firm in the Worcester area, and we are so fortunate to have her with us every single week talking about topics in both family and real estate courts. So, yeah, let's talk today about something that we haven't talked about in a while, and it's extracurricular activities for children. And if you're going through divorce or separation, or you've just broken up with your partner whom you have children with, depending on the age of the child, they're likely to have extracurricular activities. Do you see a lot of fighting about this, Nicole?
I see a lot of pushback. It doesn't necessarily mean it's fighting. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's misunderstandings. Sometimes it's, I don't agree with that's how it's written. So it all depends on, again, what the parties are having problems with. Is it the interpretation of it, or is it the lack of interpretation, or is it just because I want to do something different?
Well, I mean, it's obviously, depending on what the child is doing, it could be a very expensive activity. I mean, take like we have a horse, and that was really frowned upon during the divorce by the judge. Even though we had the horse for several years, daughter enjoys it, still loves it, takes horseback riding lessons. But that was just something that I ended up having to pay for without any help because everyone frowned upon an expensive activity. But I will say that I've never been into sports, but I know plenty of sports moms, and that is expensive. If you're in hockey or figure skating or dance, oh my gosh, the cost of being a competitive young dancer, if you're good and you're actually part of a dance team, there's trips and there's contests, and you have to, get gear, and like, who pays for all this, and what would a judge say?
And that's exactly what we're talking about because it's, well, okay, well, what have the parties been doing? And then it's, well, we went from one household that we were supporting to two households. So we can't just always do what the children want to do, ma'am. And the judge will give you that look like it's not reasonable that we're going to continue the same lifestyle identically, right? Are we going to make some tweaks? Yes. Are we going to, say that they can't involve in any activities? No. So again, we're going to look at that big picture, and they're going to also look at, what does the financial statement look like? Are these parties that are financially living paycheck to paycheck or not even living paycheck to paycheck? Or do they have a surplus of money? So we're going to look at all those circumstances to determine what's reasonable. But yeah, you talk about lacrosse, hockey, dance, those are the three most expensive sports activities that there are out there.
I mean, that's really an interesting point that there's just a lot out there. And the other thing that I've just thought of is really I remember when my child was young, we tried everything that we wanted to see what she liked, and she's not really big into sports. We tried soccer, and she's completely bored and just not athletic in that way, or not that interested, not that she's not athletic. She liked riding, she liked gymnastics, she got kicked out of dance class when she was 4. um, I'm sure she could go back now and concentrate because she does like to dance. But I mean, all of those things, they change. So you might, if you're trying to say, well, we'll do the status quo, but your kid is growing and they figure out that they don't like this and they want to try that. And, what do you do to change it so that everyone is doing something that's reasonable within, the lifestyle, and still giving the kid a chance to enjoy activities that, let's face it, sometimes when we're adults, we don't get to do it. So you have to enjoy it while you can before life takes over.
Absolutely. And I think, from my perspective, again, depending on what you can afford, I think what you said was great. try them in different activities. You have the basketball, soccer, and bowling are top three, maybe even tennis, that are really cheap. And then you have all the extra sports. So again, where can we fall in the middle? But try out those activities. Go to your school and say, what do you offer? Um, Sometimes people are into chess. Great. I have a chessboard. That's all I need. Um, but again, it's what they like. So of course the court's going to look at that. What do they like? Is it an experiment? The other part of that is, does it interfere with one parent's particular parenting time? Oh, mom signed him up for soccer, except the games are only on Thursdays, and that's when dad has his dinner parenting schedule, so let's change the date. No. And so the court's going to look at that and go, well, why wouldn't you just change the date? Well, he can go to the soccer games. Well, you signed him up. Why, again, you need to be cognizant of that. And then something that the court's going to look at is, who signed him up? Was there a conversation before the sign up? And does it interfere with their parenting time? So, again, a lot of things are going to come into play. And again, is it something that the kid likes? Or is it because I want a babysitter and I'm using it in the form of an extracurricular activity?
I don't know. I guess maybe some people do that. I always feel like it's a pain in the butt to go to and from an activity. If you're, I mean, if you're not going to sit there for the thing, you might have to go back and forth. And honestly, I can't see that being a very relaxing babysitter time. But maybe some people do that. I don't know.
Well, some people treat it as after school care because they're doing it directly after school. They don't have to pick them up. They don't have to leave work early. So again, that's where you get your babysitter mentality.
Ah, yeah, the ones where they can just stay after school. Oh, for sure. And what do you do though? Because as the child gets older, like once you hit middle school, which we hit middle school last year, um, all of a sudden there are after school activities and there's a late bus and they can take the late bus home. In fact, my daughter just wanted to work on an essay after school because apparently a lot of the X blocks were taken with school assemblies and things like that this week and they had a day off on Tuesday. So she actually stayed after school to work on an essay for her English teacher, which I thought was great. But there are times where she gets involved with a play, and then all of a sudden, near the end, when the play is about to come out, there are so many practices, and the weekend schedule for 4 or 5 days, you're bringing them to the play, and you got to get them there for the dress rehearsal. And I mean, I guess if you're trying to compromise on the parenting time, when they get a certain age, it's almost like, well, if they're in this thing that they love and the practices happen when the practices happen, you can't always plan it uh to go with the parenting schedule exactly because hey, they're supposed to be parenting during that time too. They got to take everyone has to take the kids back and forth to these things, whether it's your night or their night, someone's got to do it.
Well, somebody's got to do it. And again, that's going to be something that we're going to have to write in an agreement, because sometimes it's, no, you signed them up for that class, you take them to that activity. And some of it is, well, I'm not going to be available, so I'm not doing it. So again, is your child going to lose out, or are you going to make the sacrifice and do the trip? So again, we have to look at those circumstances and determine what's really best for this child. Is it to go to that activity? Is it for mom or dad to suffer through it, if you will, because they have to be there? Or are we going to have some alternative means? And sometimes people get creative and they say, okay, well, we're going to do you know an alternating schedule with other parents, so now I'm only hindered in this time period every other week or something of that nature. But again, that's something that we need to discuss in the court system, because without it, either your kid's going to lose out or one of your parents is going to say you're not going.
And yeah, obviously, you can't do everything you want to do. I know kids have to learn that, but I feel like sometimes, some people are more willing to help make things happen than others. And I guess, what does the judge deem fair typically in court when they have this stuff come up?
$1,000,000 question. It's definitely going to be on a case by case basis. Again, what does their history look like? What have they previously done? Is this a new activity, or is this an activity that the child's been enrolled in for years? Why can we no longer accommodate the schedule? And sometimes it is because I'm now a single parent. And I wasn't a single parent. I had my husband in the house to help me out with. So again, we need to be able to articulate that. So if you're running into those problems, you definitely want to make sure that we're having that discussion so that we can write an agreement that's going to be beneficial to both parties.
Absolutely. And so, I mean, would you recommend getting I would recommend getting your attorney involved, but it seems like it's simple enough. Oh, it's just some, it has to do with parenting time and it has to do with splitting the costs of that activity. What what would you suggest?
Well, I would suggest that first and foremost, that you have this discussion before you even have an agreement. So that you're not going back to court and going, oh, I can't believe I got to call my attorney now to amend it. We don't really want to do that either, but we may want to because we may want to look at other things that are happening. That's number one. Number two is, again, what does that agreement say? Is it already covered? Is somebody breaching that, and do we need to file a contempt? Are there other things that we need to change so that it makes it cost effective for the attorney to get involved? Or maybe it's just, hey, we have a written agreement between the parties and we acknowledge it without going into court. So again, there can be so many circumstances, but we need to know what's beneficial for you given what the court order currently says.
Yeah, so I would say definitely at least talk to your attorney, and if it needs to go into court, ask for their advice because I mean Nicole and her team do an amazing job. They're right out of Worcester, and it's always worth having a conversation with Nicole is what I found because they will be straightforward on their assessment of whether this really requires going to court and also how much is it going to cost and how much are you going to save? I mean, sometimes it's just better to bite the bullet and pay for things and make sure your kid gets those experiences that they need to get while they're young if somebody else is not going to cooperate.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you need to do that cost analysis. We can certainly go over it with you, but I think that's the one thing that we really need to know what's that's going to look like. And again, the other thing is, can you sustain it? Because maybe you can do it right now, but what if your circumstances change? What if you're in a job where they're doing all sorts of layoffs? You don't want to set a precedent that says, well, Nicole, you've been paying for it all for the last 2 years. Why do you want me to pay for it now? So again, something that we need to consider on a case by case.
I mean, this is really interesting and I guess communicating with your ex is one of the first steps of course and see what they find important as well and see if there is some kind of compromise that you can work out before you have to go through because sometimes you go to court it just takes a long time and then all of a sudden all these other issues get added to it and you end up in court for another 2 years
And
not
again,
and it's super expensive and your kid's out of school by then. I don't know.
and sometimes what also happens is, if you poke that bear, then they go, okay, fine, you want to file a modification? I'm going to file a modification for all these other things. So again, that's why we're going to go through that analysis. Is it worth it? Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's just writing a letter to the other party and getting them to sign something and saying, yep, we acknowledge this.
I mean, well, this is really great information. We really appreciate your time today. Is there anything else that you wanted to cover before we go?
I think you all need to think about what's best for your child. And sometimes what's best for your child might be is we do have to cut back because I need to make sure that there's food on the table. Sometimes that's a lot more important than the extracurricular activities. So, is there something that you can do through the school system? Is there something that you can do through a community center? Or is there something that you can do through other centers that are reduced fees, like the Boys and Girls Club? Are those other resources out there that they can still play that activity, but it's at a reduced cost? So look into those if you are struggling, because being a single parent isn't easy, but there are ways to help that. The question is, it doesn't all have to fall on your head, and it certainly doesn't all have to be, well, Sally's used to it, so she has to do it. Not necessarily true. She will survive as well.
Those are all good points. Thank you so much for coming on today, Nicole. We really appreciate your insights with this extracurricular activity topic, and we'll look forward to talking to you next week.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. We will look forward to seeing you next week, and I will talk to you soon. Have a great day.